Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I'm bringing you a brand new sculpt, and this is a brand new deer sculpt, and this little girl is called Howaitoshika, the Alpine Ridge deer. So as it is a brand new sculpt, I'll go through the resin piece that I have for it. So I haven't cast it with any horns, so I'll be adding them later. So this is a resin cast of an original sculpture that I sculpted out of monster clay, molded in silicone, and then cast in resin. And then I'll be adding these antlers to the little antler holes that I've made specifically to fit these antlers. They are plastic, so they're very durable, and they won't break very easily, just like Sculpey or something would. And air dry clay doesn't really do what I want it to do, so I wanted to make a new sculpt. So I'm going to make this a pure white deer, and I'm going to be painting around the eyes, nose and mouth with a Matisse baby pink colour. So I went for more of an albino inspired look, but it doesn't have the albino eyes. So I have cast glass eyes in this. It's just a little process that I have sort of developed myself, so I'm thinking of doing something on a future Patreon, because I'm looking at opening a Patreon so I can offer some more things. So hopefully the glass eyes will be one of them in the very distant future, because I'm just so busy right now. So what I've done here is I've added the horns, the antlers, to the top of the head, and they have been set in some epoxy sculpt. So I just sort of attached them around the headpiece with the epoxy sculpt and just let them dry overnight for 24 hours to make sure it is hard, so they don't fall off or anything. And I've battered these antlers around quite a lot, and they are very, very durable, surprisingly. So apart from my Drogon doll, this is my biggest art doll that I've made, and heaviest, just because I've used a plastic ball and socket armature with this one, so it is more posable, but it is restrictive as well. So there's pros and cons with wire and plastic armatures, so I'm hopefully do a video on the pros and cons on the two different armatures in the future. I'm just going to find the time to do it. So then you guys can see what my opinion is of the two different types of armatures. So just like with all the dolls that I create, okay, make a little backstory for them. So here's a little backstory for Howaitoshika, the Alpine Ridge deer. Alpine Ridge deer are shy creatures. They tend to avoid contact with anything but their own kind. They live in a large herd with the intentions of safety in numbers. These deer come in many different colouring patterns, mainly consisting of whites, browns, greys, and blend into their surroundings. Deer with mostly white colouring with patches of brown or grey are called morphs. A pure white is a rare morph, especially those with pink features and dark eyes, as they are not considered albino. As the deer live mainly in wintry conditions, their coats are generally thicker than other deer, consisting of a thick undercoat and a longer top coat. Unlike other deer species, both male and female have antlers. This is due to the fact that these deer use their antlers to dig for food in the snow. The male has larger antlers, while the female has smaller antlers. Alpine Ridge deer are found on the mainland named Kandara, mainly in the Alpine Ridge region, but tend to wander down into clear water. So there you have the little story. Let me know what you think down in the comments, or if you have any ideas as well or inspiration from it, let me know in the comments. Alright, so what I've done here is I've painted up the antlers with a colouring for the undertone colouring. First of all, because these antlers were plastic, they were a bit slippery, so I did apply a undercoat of white paint with a good tooth to it, just so the paint doesn't actually end up rubbing off really easily. So the undercoat that I put under was a sort of goldy yellow colour, because I wanted it to show through with the antlers. And if you look at some antlers, it has like a lightish yellow colour underneath of antlers. And then I'm going over with a coat of brown, just a raw umber I think it was, to cover the antlers again, but I wanted some of that yellow to show through the brown. So I'm just applying a light coat of that. I think I did roughly 3 coats of it, and then I'm going to go and highlight the tips of the antlers with a lighter colour. And this is just a colour that I mixed myself with some white and yellow, and I'm just blending it into the tips of the antlers, because I noticed some of the deers have lighter tips on their antlers, so I just wanted to do that as well. And then just painting in any little details along the antlers itself. So all of the paints I'm using are water-based acrylics from Chromacryl. It's an Australian brand made here in Australia. I really like these colours and paints. I think they're really smooth and go on really well. And once I've painted up the antlers and left them to dry, I'm going to coat them with a coat of matte medium by Liquitex. And this is just so it protects the paint job, so it's not easily rubbed off or anything. So if you don't protect it and you end up rubbing your antlers or paintwork a lot, sometimes they tend to come off because one, it is on plastic, or two, it's on resin, so paint doesn't tend to stick to those two things very well, so you will need a coat of something to protect your paint job. Okay, moving on to the little hooves, and these are also something that I've sculpted and it is cast in resin. So I wanted sort of a dark brown hoof with this, so I did a black undertone and then I ended up going over the hooves themselves with some brown paint. Just a really light coat of brown paint, so nothing too overpowering. It was more of a dry brush coat, so just a tiny bit just to get a brown undertone to it. And I did cast the plastic ball and socket armature into the resin pieces, so there's no chance of that coming out. Okay, so this is the fur that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be trimming it quite a lot because deers have a shorter fur, but it will be a little bit longer than regular deer fur because they, like I said in the story, it lives in wintry conditions, so their coats are a bit thicker. So this is the white fur that I use for pretty much everything that I use white for. It's fantastic fur. I get it locally from Spotlight if you're in Australia. Definitely check out their white fur. It's the best one that I've come across so far, but get it on sale. Wait till they have sales because they always have sales, so don't buy them full price because their fabrics are always on sale unless you really want the fur piece. So as you can see, I've drawn out the new deer body pattern. It took me a little while to work it out, but I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. I could probably do it a bit longer, the torso bit in the middle a bit longer, but above all, I'm pretty happy with the way the body turned out. It is the first doll, so it's always a sort of a surprise how it turns out because you never know until you test a pattern. But yeah, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I could make the legs a little bit bigger because the plastic ball and socket armature was quite big for this one, just to support the weight for it. So I think I have to make the legs just a tad bigger in the next deer. So once I've cut all the pieces out, I then pin it together, first side together, and run it through the sewing machine. As you can see here, just doing a quick little run through on the sewing machine, and I do prefer to use the sewing machine because it's a lot stronger than hand sewing and a lot faster as well. There are still some bits you need to hand sew, like the legs and the rear end of the doll, just because you need to leave it open to flip it inside out or the right way around. But yeah, I always try to minimize the amount of hand sewing because it takes so long, and I'm not the biggest fan of hand sewing either, so I much prefer to do on the sewing machine. Alright, so once it's all sewn up, this is what we have. You can see how small the leg area ended up being, so I did have to unpick the front of the legs and hand sew it around the armature because it just wasn't really big enough with that amount of seam allowance that I did. So once it was hand sewn together, it fit well, but yeah, I'd have to make it bigger if I'm going to sew it through the sewing machine. So once I've flipped it inside out, this is what we have here. I'll then snap the armature together. You can check out my armature video of how the plastic ball and socket armature snaps together, so I don't really need to go through that because it's pretty self-explanatory. And then I sew everything up, put some polyfill in it, and I don't know where the rest of this footage went, but I can show you the final result after I've finished everything and sewn together and furred the face. And here she is. She's available on Etsy. You can check out my shop to see if she's still around, if she hasn't found a home yet. So the link to my shop is in the description. I always get a lot of questions asking where my shop is, or do I even sell them. But yes, the link is in my description, so definitely check that out. That's it from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. If you have any requests, you can leave it in the comments down below. You can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!